I listen to a bunch of Bitcoin energy podcasts, so you don't have to. Hello, fellow peacemakers. Welcome back to episode 25 of Make Peace Not Beef. Today, we're going to talk all about Bitcoin. Yes, the topic that everyone is talking about, yet very few actually understand what it is and how it works. Fun fact, back in 2017, I bought $250 worth of Bitcoin. And in January this year, I sold it for $700. It almost tripled in value. Anyway, in this episode, we will first learn about what Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and blockchain are, and then I'll offer my views on the great energy debate and why I think Bitcoin is the key to a clean and renewable powered future. Now, I've been wanting to do this episode for a very long time, given how much buzz there is around Bitcoin and crypto, and how much controversy Bitcoin has stirred up in the past few years, and just how much misinformation there is about cryptocurrency. But of course, I first researched the facts so I can deliver well-reasoned and evidence-backed arguments to you, and hopefully convince you that Bitcoin has more pros than cons. And here I am today, ready to share with you my findings. Quick note, in this episode, I'm going to use the term Bitcoin to refer to both Bitcoin and cryptocurrency more broadly. So first things first, I want to walk you through the basics of cryptocurrency and define some terms just so that we're all on the same page. If you're a crypto expert, bear with me for a second. So quickly, what is Bitcoin? What is cryptocurrency? What is blockchain? What are all these terms that you see floating around on the internet all the time? So the money that you and I currently spend in our wallet, on our credit cards, that's fiat currency, which means a physical currency issued and regulated by a central government or a central bank. The opposite of fiat currency is cryptocurrency, meaning a digital or virtual currency secured by cryptography that runs on a large distributed networks of computers, meaning it's decentralized and not controlled by one single institution. Bitcoin is a type of cryptocurrency, but there are millions of other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum, Litecoin, Ripple, Stellar Lumens, even Dogecoin, which was literally invented as a joke from a meme on the internet, but blew up and later became backed by Elon Musk. But today we're going to talk about Bitcoin here because it is the #1 most popular cryptocurrency with the highest trading volume and the highest value globally. Next, what is blockchain? Blockchain is simply the technology that cryptocurrency uses to record and process transactions. It's basically a distributed digital ledger that allows a network of computers to work together to verify and record transactions. Okay, so now we know what cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and blockchain are. Let's look at the process of Bitcoin mining, which is often talked about, right? So Bitcoin mining is the process of adding new Bitcoins into the circulation. Kind of like gold mining, except you don't physically dig a hole in the ground and try to extract the gold with Bitcoin. You have what's called Bitcoin miners, which are specialized computers that compete to solve complex mathematical equations in order to verify a group of transactions, also known as a block. Now, the probability of solving it is extremely low, and it's basically a process of trial and error. And the first miner to solve it will be rewarded with new Bitcoins. So what problem exactly are these miners trying to solve? There is something called a target hash, basically a very long sequence of digits set by the Bitcoin network, and this target changes over time. The miner's objective is to find a hash, which is a 64-digit hexadecimal number that is less than or equal to a target hash. I apologize to those who are not computer science students. You can go Google what a hexadecimal number means, but it's basically a digit that can have 16 possible values. So this is the criteria for the hash to be accepted. It has to be less than or equal to the target hash. The miners try to solve for this hash by guessing for what's called a nonce, which is an abbreviation for a number used only once. And this nonce is used as one of the inputs to a hashing algorithm called SHA-256. And the output the miner gets is a hash that's either accepted or rejected, depending on if it's higher than or lower than the target hash. The reason why it's so difficult to get a hash is because there's no way to predict what the hash will be for a given nonce until you actually calculate it using the function. Hence, the entire process of getting an acceptable hash requires numerous trial and errors. The miners keep trying until they find a hash that is accepted, meaning it's less than or equal to the target hash. Whichever miner finds this hash first, in a process known as proof of work, gets to add this block of transactions to the blockchain once it's peer-reviewed, kind of like adding a new entry in the ledger. And this miner is rewarded a fixed amount of Bitcoins. Right now, every 10 minutes, someone solves the block and they're awarded, as of now, 6.25 Bitcoins, which is equivalent to $200,000 US. Do you see now why so many people join the Bitcoin mining game? Because $200,000 for just solving a single block is a lot of money. Now, the Bitcoin reward halves every 4 years, so by 2024, the reward for each block will be down to 3.125 Bitcoins. Okay, so now this is where the energy controversy begins, because many people claim that Bitcoin mining is a very energy-intensive process. Why is it that? Why is that so? Because Bitcoin mining's difficulty is designed to be adaptive, where the more miners join the network to solve the puzzle to validate transactions, the more difficult it becomes to solve the puzzle, and the more computing power required to solve the puzzle. Remember that target hash that we talked about earlier? The target hash is basically a self-adjusting mechanism that tweaks Bitcoin mining's difficulty level. So the lower the target hash, the higher the difficulty. The block time is kept constant at 10 minutes, which means that every 10 minutes, roughly, a winner finds the solution, and because this time is kept relatively constant, the more people who join the network, the algorithm adapts to make it harder to solve the problem such that the time it takes to solve each block is kept roughly constant. Now I'm going to introduce an important term called the hash rate, which refers to the combined processing power of a Bitcoin mining network, measured in the number of calculations or guesses per second. Now the higher the hash rate, the higher the chance that a miner will solve the next block, and hence will be rewarded. Some mining networks reach hash rates in the trillions. That's trillions of guesses or computations per second. That's how competitive Bitcoin mining has become. And most people don't mine Bitcoin on their regular laptops, right? I mean, they could, but their chances of winning would be fairly small. That's why many miners use a mining pool to drastically boost their chances of finding the right solution faster. And they use dedicated GPUs to mine Bitcoin because it's got a lot more processing than a regular CPU. If all of this so far has been very confusing, let me give you a simple analogy to help you understand Bitcoin. So suppose there's a contest that you can enter, and there's a jackpot that you can win, a fixed amount of money. You win this contest by being the first one to guess the correct combination to a 3-digit lock. So picture that combo lock that you had on your high school locker, assuming you went to school in North America. But as more people participate in this contest, the contest upgrades to using a lock with more digits, hence it'll become more difficult to guess the correct combo. So imagine now that the game changes to using a 5-digit combo lock instead of 3. So it's harder to guess the correct combination, right? And then more people join and the game once again switches to using a 7-digit combo lock. So it's even more difficult now to guess the right combination, so on and so forth. That's kind of the idea with Bitcoin mining. The difficulty increases as more players join the mining game. So, back to the energy argument. Yes, Bitcoin is very energy intensive, but it won't pose a problem in terms of carbon emissions. Why is that? Because you're going to see that Bitcoin mining will be largely powered by renewables, and we're talking about hydro, solar, wind, and geothermal. These are ways to generate electricity that do not produce carbon dioxide. Not only so, the expansion of cryptocurrency might just be what we need to accelerate our transition to a fully sustainable world powered by renewable energy. Yes, I'm basically saying Bitcoin and crypto will drive renewable energy development outside of Bitcoin as well. Confused by it all? Allow me to explain. First of all, there are 3 challenges we currently experience with renewable energy that make it very difficult to scale and harness. Challenge number 1, intermittency. Solar and wind are intermittent renewable energy sources, which means the output isn't always constant, and therefore we can't guarantee a steady throughput. But the electrical grid in a city needs a steady throughput to power the entire city. So what ends up happening most of the time is, for a few hours per day, the sun or the wind produces way more energy than we can capture and store, so most of that energy is actually lost. And then during energy peak hours where our electricity demand spikes, solar and wind don't nearly produce enough to meet our energy demand. That's the first challenge. Challenge number 2, energy storage bottleneck. The sun produces virtually an unlimited amount of energy, more than enough to power the entire Earth. But we haven't figured out a way to capture and store the energy at that magnitude, and that's why our ability to scale up renewables is held back by a storage bottleneck. Challenge number 3, grid congestion. If you think about where renewables are generated, they're usually located in very remote rural areas far away from the site of usage or where people live. Iceland, due to its location, is ideal for cheap geothermal power generation. Remote parts of Tunisia and Morocco and North Africa, including the deserts, are ideal locations for wind energy generation. But once you generate this energy, how are you going to deliver the energy from the generators to the cities and towns and industries where people actually use them? You're going to need to build very long transmission lines that carry the electricity from the power plant all the way to cities. But As we all know, due to friction and resistance, energy gets lost along the way in the form of heat. So the longer the transmission lines, the more energy is lost. That's not so efficient, right? Now, this is where Bitcoin comes in and presents a unique solution to the renewable energy conundrum, because Bitcoin essentially acts as a location-agnostic, time-agnostic, flexible, interruptible load consumer. Basically, what that means is Bitcoin mining operations can literally be built right next to these remote renewable power generators in the middle of a desert or near the volcanoes in Iceland. And the miners can readily utilize all the excess renewable energy that is generated that would have otherwise been lost because we aren't able to store it quickly enough. And it is a flexible load consumer, meaning that Bitcoin mining operations can be turned on or off or dialed up or down based on the energy demand elsewhere. This means that Bitcoin mining can effectively happen during off-peak hours where renewables are producing an excess amount of energy. And during peak hours where renewables profit from selling energy back onto the grid, we can simply wind down on Bitcoin mining. Don't worry if you're confused, because I came up with another cool analogy to help you understand what is happening. So picture the biggest supermarket that you know, right? It's stacked with food and produce all day long. However, on average, 40% of all the food on the shelf is never actually sold and gets tossed out because the supply always exceeds the demand. So the store owner is very frustrated, as you can imagine. It's actually kind of an accurate depiction of our food waste endemic, by the way. So now imagine this food bank comes along and says to the supermarket, whatever extra food you have, don't throw it away, we're gonna buy it, and we will use this food to feed people, to feed our community. That's basically the relationship between our renewable power plants and Bitcoin mining, right? There's a huge myth claiming that Bitcoin mining is wasting lots of energy, when in reality, this couldn't be further from the truth. First of all, if Bitcoin is running on renewables, then most likely it's consuming excess renewable energy that would have otherwise been lost because we can't capture and store it. And two, Bitcoin mining is not useless, it's extremely valuable. Bitcoin mining is used to verify transactions and add blocks to the blockchain, maintaining the digital ledger of a decentralized economy. Bitcoin mining is everything but trivial. It is what powers and fuels the crypto economy, which could very much become our mainstream currency in the future when we move away from fiat money and all the problems associated with these ancient financial institutions, including fraud. Plus, Bitcoin has many socio-economic benefits as well. And some articles predict that Bitcoin will become the greatest economic equalizer that could bring an end to social inequality. But in this episode, I'm not going to talk about digital social justice. But if you're curious, you should read into why this is. It's actually pretty interesting. It has to do with how populations in many underdeveloped countries do not have access to traditional banking and financial instruments like credit cards and loans. And Bitcoin leapfrogs all these infrastructures and middlemen like credit card companies, which are considered luxuries in relatively developed nations. And Bitcoin allows anyone with a Bitcoin wallet to transact. But since I'm an environmentalist first and foremost, let's go back to the energy debate for a second. So according to recent studies, roughly 75% of crypto mining in the world runs on renewables. That's a lot. To give an example, China is home to the world's majority of Bitcoin mining facilities, and Bitcoin mining operations in China heavily harnesses renewables, right? Sichuan province is located in southwest China. Quick refresher, if you watched episode 20 of my podcast where I talked about Asian vegetables, it's the same province where hot pot and mapo tofu originated from. Anyway, so Sichuan province is known for suffering from an excessive amount of hydropower that gets lost every year because of the energy storage bottleneck that I talked about earlier. And for this reason, many Bitcoin mining facilities are built in Sichuan to effectively capture and utilize this excess hydro energy without having to store it. Once again, think back to my food bank analogy. What do you do with all this excess food in the supermarket? You either toss it away or you give it to the food bank. Bitcoin is that food bank. It's effectively an energy battery. Even if Bitcoin is not fully powered by renewables, I would still argue that it doesn't necessarily use more energy than traditional banks, combined with all the other intermediary financial institutions and payment processors that work in tandem with banks to support our fiat money system. Why? Because Bitcoin is digital, and most banks are not fully digital. If you think about our global banking system, imagine all the local branches, ATMs that are operating around the world, all the giant skyscrapers, all the electricity, heating and cooling needed to power these giant buildings, all the employees and their computers in their offices, all the energy needed by the banks to process and verify transactions, and all the energy needed by the point of sale, payment processors, credit card companies, and finally, all the energy that goes into cybersecurity, fraud detection, and fraud prevention. That's a lot of energy, right? We currently operate in a financial world where there are multiple handshakes between multiple stakeholders involved in a single financial transaction. Bitcoin simplifies all of that down to a single handshake, so I think it would use way less energy if anything. Another myth I want to dispel is that higher transaction volume leads to higher energy consumption. This is false. Bitcoin mining, or mining new blocks and adding them onto the blockchain, is an energy-intensive process, but the actual energy cost of a transaction is not energy-intensive. It's barely noticeable, or at least comparable to a Visa transaction, so I don't think that's a valid concern. Lastly, I want to talk about why Bitcoin not only utilizes excess renewable energy, but it could potentially drive mass adoption of renewables around the world across the board by driving the cost of renewables way down. Now, if you think about it, a Bitcoin miner's profit margin solely depends on the cost associated with mining, which is electricity cost. And every Bitcoin miner wants to maximize their profits. So due to the nature of Bitcoin mining, every miner is incentivized to find the lowest cost of a constant stream of electricity. And that's renewables, right? Wind and solar are already cheaper than fossil fuels. So as more Bitcoin miners join the network, naturally they look for the cheapest electricity to do all these computations, they will turn to renewables. So more demand for renewables fuels more supply. So more operators and electricity suppliers and investors will be incentivized to deploy more renewables and invest in renewables. And that's how Bitcoin could spur the green revolution the world desperately needs. So to sum things up, in this episode I explained what Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, blockchain are and how they work. To quickly recap, I explained that Bitcoin is a type of cryptocurrency and that blockchain is the underlying technology of cryptocurrency. Most importantly, I dismantled the Bitcoin energy myth for you by showing you that Bitcoin is not sucking up energy from the grid and polluting the planet, but rather the process of Bitcoin mining captures and utilizes excess renewable energy that otherwise would have been wasted. So in a way, it's analogous to a generous food bank that buys back excess food from the local supermarket and uses it to feed the community. Otherwise, this food would have been tossed out by the supermarket anyway. Even better, I've shown you that Bitcoin is a location-agnostic, flexible, interruptible load consumer. So all you need is electricity and connection to the network, and you're ready to mine. So that means Bitcoin mining facilities can literally be built in remote areas right next to the renewable generators, eliminating the need for long transmission lines and storage capabilities, and drastically increasing the energy utilization and efficiency of renewables. Because they are flexible load consumers, you can turn them on or off at a moment's notice to complement the demand for renewables. Next, I showed you that Bitcoin mining will not only fuel demand for renewables, but could drive the cost of renewables way down, spurring a green revolution that leads to mass adoption and expansion of solar and wind and hydro. Last but not least, for anyone that tells you that Bitcoin is an energy-intensive process that wastes energy, it's not a waste of energy. Bitcoin mining simultaneously verifies transactions and creates new blocks on the blockchain. Compared to good old fiat currency, not only is Bitcoin more secure, ushers in a renewable-dominated world, but one day it might just become the very instrument that brings financial liberty and equality to all. Thank you so much, and I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you like this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment down below. And I'll see you in the next episode.